And our next speaker is Meg Ciliberti. Meg is a senior IT manager at Shopify, leading teams that provide specialized support, engineering impactful internal tools, and curate their extensive SaaS portfolio. Meg has been using Mac since OS 7. Ah, yes, I remember those days. And fondly remembers being teased for not having a cool PC. We all outlived that though, thank goodness. Prior to Shopify, Meg was at Apple for 11 years in a variety of different roles. Meg was also a speaker at our 2017 conference. Meg's favorite Mac is the 11-inch MacBook Air, a great little computer which I have played with and have used. And the only thing I found that was lacking in that computer was the hard drive, which I upgraded and had a great time with it after that. Meg's talk is entitled The Oh Shh Moment. And without further ado, here is Meg.
Hey everyone. Before I get into my presentation and talk about what the oh shit moment is, I do want to say a really quick thank you to Anthony and the other conference organizers, as well as the university, for putting Mac Deploy on again this year. This was the first conference I spoke at a few years ago, and I'm super happy to be back, and I'm really hoping that the next time we do this, we can actually be in person again. So with that being said, let me kick off my presentation.
Okay, so for those of you that don't know me, hi, I'm Meg. I'm the senior IT manager at Shopify, and I've been here for about 4.5 years. I'm based in Toronto. I lead a couple of different teams within IT at Shopify. Our specialized IT support team focuses on providing support and maintenance for some of our most critical internal tools. Things like Okta, Jamf, Google Workspace, Help Desk, Slack, etc. Our IT acceleration team provides program management for some associated areas to that. Things like service desk management, software asset management, and identity access management. Our software portfolio team focuses on curating our internal tech stack. Prior to being at Shopify, I was with Apple for about 11 years in a couple of different roles, did a couple of different stints in Cupertino as well. And as a fun fact, because I know when we do conferences in person, that hallway track really allows us to connect to each other and get to know each other beyond the presentations we're making or wherever work we're sharing with each other. But my fun fact is that I am a huge foodie. I love to talk about food. I love to try new foods. I love to learn about food. So if you are also a foodie, please reach out to me in the Mac Admin Slack and we can chat. I'd like to start my presentation off by telling you a story about March 11th, 2020. Let me set the scene for you. It was the end of the day. Shopify in our 3 Toronto offices were beginning to head home. Maybe some were in the lounge having a beer, maybe some were playing ping pong. But what all of them had in common is that they were completely unaware that later that night, they would receive an email from our leadership letting us know that we needed to work from home immediately as of the next day. You see, cases in Toronto were on the rise, the risk of community spread was growing, and there was honestly still just a lot to be learned about this new thing called COVID-19. So to keep us and our families safe, our leadership made the decision to have us work from home for the foreseeable future immediately as of the next day. So all of those Shopify folk that were wrapping stuff up for the day probably took their laptops home, right? Right? Spoiler alert, they didn't. A lot of people had left our offices that day without taking their work laptops home. And so later that night, myself and another member of my team spun up a custom help desk workflow to dropship loaner machines from our vendor to those Shopify folk that had left their work laptops at work. When they would be able to head into an office again, maybe to pick up personal items or something, they could just simply leave those loaners on our help desk and we would get back to them when we were in the office next. In the days and weeks to come, all of Shopify, and honestly most of you in your companies as well, would be work from home for the foreseeable future. A few months after that, we would actually find out that we were going to become an entirely remote company. March 11th was the oh shit moment. At the time, 30% of Shopify was already remote. That means that 70% of the company who were used to working in offices now needed to adapt to this new way of working. Everything changed after this day. About the way we work as a company, the way we work as a team, how we look at our processes and our tooling, all of it needed an immediate focus on not just how do we do these things when we can't physically be together, but how do we do them well? And so in this presentation, I want to touch on some of the things that my team has shipped over the past year that have helped us adapt to being a digital by design company and what we learned along the way. I'm going to focus on 3 specific areas for my presentation today: support, software, and hardware. And I'm going to first start off by introducing you briefly to our help desk. So in 2018, our team launched a project to create a new help desk experience at Shopify. We sought out to replace our existing solution with something that would give us more flexibility to create a very tailored experience, not just for the IT team, but for any team that provided any type of service to Shopify. And there are many different teams. So some of the teams on this screen are teams that were on help desk before we went remote. Some of them switched to help desk when we went remote, especially teams like culinary, physical security, even our networking team. These are teams that may not have had a help desk presence had we not gone digital by design. To date, we have 149 unique service catalog items, all attached to these teams and the other teams that I did not show on the screen, that all provide a very unique experience for Shopify, no matter what it is that they're requesting. A lot of them kick off additional automation into other tooling or other places, but it provides that one-stop shop for people to go when they need help. In the spring of 2020, we launched Helpmoji at Shopify. Many of you are familiar with or may already be using something like Zapier to emoji tag things in a tool like Slack and to push that to a ticketing system of some type. However, we just found that didn't really scale well for us as we continued to grow, and we weren't really able to tag and trigger workflows from it the way that we were hoping. So we developed Helpmoji internally as a solution to this problem. Helpmoji does allow us to continue the same emoji tagging system that creates those interaction receipts that we had with Zapier, but it takes it a step further. It allows us to have an interactive prompt for the agent to provide more information via a DM for documentation purposes. This is done through our custom-built help desk app. It also allows for more robust data analysis with tagging. So teams that are using Helpmoji can begin to take that data and extrapolate it to determine things like average response time, time to resolution. And what's really cool is that Helpmoji has actually helped the teams that use it build cases for things like headcount, or have even helped them just simply identify pain points in their support workflows based on traffic. Lastly, Helpmoji allows us to trigger workflows to sequence different types of events. And one such workflow that was not going to be possible at all had we not created Helpmoji is our AppleCare Enterprise workflow. So this workflow that's on the screen looks a little complex, but I'll try to break it down and make it super simple. It handles 3 different things: an in-warranty repair, an out-of-warranty repair, and a software repair. If it's an out-of-warranty repair, what Helpmoji does is it pushes the request through our workflow, which will notify our IT logistics team assigned in our ACE group, and it'll also notify the original requester of the policy number and contact information they need to schedule an appointment to have AppleCare Enterprise support handle their repair. If it's an in-warranty repair, even better. It doesn't even need to interact with the IT team at all. It simply notifies the requester, gives them the contact information, and sets them up with everything they need to reach out to ACE. This workflow would not have been possible without Helpmoji. It is entirely automated, and it's such a great example of what we can do when we build internal tooling. Helpmoji looks like this. So this is just an average ping that pops into our Help IT channel in Slack. The little eye emoji, I think a lot of us probably use to tag something and let someone know we're looking at it. But the second emoji that's there, which is a little orange life raft, this is Helpmoji. So if a ping comes into a channel and that channel has been configured with Helpmoji, once an agent tags that request with that little emoji, it kicks off a whole process. This is what the agent would see or the specialist would see after they've done that. So if that request on the screen before, if I was handling that and I tagged it with Helpmoji, I would then receive this DM from our help desk app letting me know to add multiple tags to this interaction. If I choose to go to the quick categorization screen, I can view a number of different options that I can use to classify this request by and kick off some of those associated workflows that I was talking about. If I'd like, I can also click Enhance and add multiple things in case it's something that applies to multiple categories, and I can also just add extra documentation for record-keeping purposes. Later that summer, we rolled out version 2 of Helpmoji, making it entirely self-serve. That meant that teams could now configure Helpmoji on their own, in their own Slack channels, and begin to benefit from some of the features I highlighted. It also began to capture information in threads, something that was incredibly important, especially to my team. So in our Help IT channel, we see roughly 170 to 180 unique pings per day, looking for some type of support. Some of those things that we see, we can absolutely just solve in the moment. It's a very quick fix. Some of those things we can push to a ticket for some more asynchronous work on, but quite often there may be a request that has a thread, something where maybe there's some problem solving going back and forth, a little bit of troubleshooting. And this iteration in Helpmoji v2 allowed us to capture not only the original ping from the user, but all of the associated thread as well. So just to highlight a little bit of some of the numbers we see with both Helpdesk and Helpmoji, just so you can get a sense of how impactful these two tools are. So for Helpdesk, if we look at Q1 2021 versus 2020, we've already seen a 217% increase in the volume of requests that are coming through our Helpdesk instance. Again, these are not just for IT, they're for any team that provides some type of service fulfillment through Helpdesk. And in Q2, which is not quite wrapped up yet, but we're already on pace to get probably as close as Q1, potentially even beat it as well. When we start to compare Helpdesk and Helpmoji, this is where you really see how impactful a tool like Helpmoji is. So the amounts you see in dark green here are tickets in Helpdesk that were created directly in Helpdesk. So in Q1, we had 19,000 plus, and in Q, we have just a little over 17,000 plus. Now, the numbers you see in yellow are specifically requests that were created originating by tagging with Helpmoji. So in Q1 alone, we've already surpassed the volume that we were doing directly in Helpdesk. And again, in Q2, we're on pace to beat that as well. So for me, when I look at this data, it is a bit staggering, but I think what's really cool is this is showing us where our users want to get help. Clearly, they prefer to get help through a tool like Slack than through a traditional Helpdesk portal like Helpdesk. What's also really cool is that when we actually took a look at all of the data for Helpdesk, the actual portal, year over year, there's actually a very slow growth percentage increase of people that are opting to choose to go to a portal versus, again, interacting with our teams or other teams in Slack. So again, it's just further highlighting that we really need to focus on building tools where users want to use them, which in our case for support is with Slack. So next I'll talk to you a little bit about software, and for that, I'll introduce you to Keler. At the end of 2019, we launched Keler. And Keler is an internal software tracker. Essentially, it's a database of all the software that's used internally at Shopify. We wanted a SaaS management solution that wasn't just finance facing or IT facing. It wasn't just about finding opportunities to identify shadow IT or to recoup costs. It was really about building a trusted platform for users to identify the tooling that can help them be more productive and to get shit done. So what does Keler do? It allows users to view a comprehensive list of approved and unapproved software at Shopify. This is important. Even though these are work-issued devices, we allow people to propose tooling that is for personal use. You want to go ahead and propose Steam, Minecraft, Spotify, whatever, go ahead and do it as long as it's proposed through Keler first before installing. It allows users to learn valuable information around the security posture and functionality of a service. It lets them find out which team supports that tool and where to go for help if they need it. It also shows them approved data types. What type of information can be stored safely in this tool and what information cannot. And lastly, it lets users propose new tooling for use, but it also allows them to propose new tooling if they'd like to sunset a tool as well. With Shopify being digital by design, we begin to see a very large increase in requests for types of tooling that were very clearly reflective of the loss of the office environment. One example is collaboration tooling. For example, with people unable to gather in person around a desk to do things like sprints or other working sessions, they were now looking to new tooling beyond what was already available and approved to help them replicate that in-person experience. In some cases, people wanted to utilize VR tooling to do the same thing. Software to replace the in-office whiteboards was a pretty big request as well. These are not things that people take for granted at Shopify. They are very much in use when we were in the offices, so that was a common request that we saw pop up again and again. And lastly, team building. With in-person events being on pause for just a little while and team members being even more just distributed than ever before, we saw a big increase in requests for different type of tooling to simply just allow people to have fun, but virtually. So with our procurement pathway, I'll provide you a little bit of a snippet on how it works. So Shopify can propose a new tool for review in Keler. That then queues up the review for our software portfolio team in Help Desk. In Keler, users will be able to see that a tool is under review and that the date that process kicked off. From there, once our software portfolio reviews the business case, they may opt to loop in stakeholders or even book a sync with the requester just to get a little bit more context on why they're requesting a tool. From there, the request flows to our continuous security team who determines the overall risk of the app. And once that's approved, it then ends up with our procurement team and our legal team, depending on whether it's a paid app or if it needs some type of contract review. Our legal team also lets us know what approved data types are originating from this tool. Finally, some of the last steps are the tool will be moved to awaiting implementation stage, which is when we'll determine if we need to configure SSO. And if we do, we loop in the device and identity team. And then finally, when all is said and done and the tool has flowed through this entire journey, Keler entry is updated and now users can view the updated information of the tool and it is no longer in proposed status or it's rejected. Keler looks like this. So in this screenshot, you can see the services page for 1Password teams. On the left, just some basic kind of at a glance type information, pointing the user where to go if they need help, letting them know what categories it belongs to. And on the right, you can see some of those approved data types so users understand what data is safe to store in this tool and what data should they avoid doing that with. On this next screenshot, you can see key metrics. This screenshot allows us to see what users are using 1Password teams on what devices and through what method of authentication. It also shows us fluctuations for each of those categories. So what this is really useful for is for us to identify if a tool has like a large drop off of users all of a sudden, maybe that's a prime candidate for sunsetting. But on the flip side of that, if a tool all of a sudden has a huge spike in users, like some of those categories I mentioned earlier, collaboration, whiteboarding, team building, we might actually want to explore an enterprise contract for that tool. Teams can view specific information about how their team is using tooling in Keler as well. So in this screenshot for my team, we can see the amount of services that we own as a team, the amount of services that we support as a team, and the overall quality score for those associated entries in Keler. Looks like we've got a little bit of work to do to bring that number up a little bit higher. Further down on that page, teams can actually view the amount of people on their team using particular types of tooling. This is useful for both leads of the team or members of a team to identify what the default standardized tooling is for their team itself, but it's also useful for some of my teams like our identity and access management, program manager, as well as our software portfolio team to be able to identify opportunities for automation. Some quick stats about Keler. So from its inception in November 2019 until now, we have just over 1,900 services that we've reviewed. Each individual requires human interaction, so that's quite a lot of services, with just over 1,300 of them approved for use at Shopify. And some other stats as well about services. The four numbers you see on the screen represent different points in time from when Keler was launched at Shopify in 2019, all the way through 1 year into digital by design. Coolest numbers are actually on the right side of the screen. So 195 reflects the amount of requests we saw through Keler from when we went remote in mid-March, on March 11th, to when we went permanent work from home, which was sometime in May. So in just under 2 months, we saw a very large spike of requests for people that are looking for these new types of tools to help them adapt to this new way of working. And then finally, in 1 year into digital by design, we've seen to date just over about 800 unique requests pertaining to different types of tooling. If any of you have seen any of my past presentations, you might remember me speaking about an internally built tool called Get Shit Fixed, or GSF for short. You might even have one of the stickers I've given out on your laptop, and if you do, you get bonus points. Well, GSF has grown up, and it's time to get a new name, and that name is Shopify Devices. It acts as a one-stop shop for the IT team. It allows us to process almost anything we need to do with our device fleet. So when we went remote, we ran into a couple of different problems that were really exacerbated by not having an office to return to. And to add to that, Shopify introduced a program allowing employees to travel to other cities or other countries called Destination 90. This also proposed some logistical challenges with our devices as well. Some of the issues we faced when we went remote were that we now needed to automate reach out for non-compliant devices. When we were in an office, it was super easy to just shoot someone a ping and have them pop 2 floors up or wherever to the IT pod to remediate whatever was wrong with their device to cause it to not check into MDM. When we're entirely remote, it's not as easy to get a hold of people as you think, and you're not in person anymore, so it does make it much harder. Device collections are now 100% done remotely. So that means that we can't rely on people dropping their laptops off in our IT pod. What do you do when there is no pod? Test device distribution and monitoring was a tricky one. There was no more device wall. There was no more device cart. So to get test devices into the hands of those that need them, we needed to come up with a plan to be able to distribute them, but then also to redistribute them as needed. And lastly, we needed to build a comprehensive view across platforms. We have a couple of different types of devices in use at Shopify, and being able to view them all in one place simply would have just made life a lot easier. So that's what we did. We built Shopify Devices, and this is a quick screenshot of what a profile looks like in that tool. So with my profile here, you can see that I have the option to add a device if something's missing, and it shows me all of the devices that are currently associated with my user. You can see the Mac I use as my daily driver. You can see the 3 testing devices that I have as well. And you can also view a little bit more information, which I'll show you in just a sec. When a user clicks the action button, they're presented with a couple of options, and admins are presented with options as well. So as a user, I have the ability to request a return box. So if one of these test devices is just no longer being used by me and I just don't want it collecting dust at my house, I can initiate a return box being sent to me automatically. I can package it up and send it back to our vendor. Doesn't need any human interaction at all. I can remove the device from my profile if I'm just simply no longer using it. I've sent it back and for whatever reason it's still there. I can go ahead and remove that, or I can set the device type. So if one of these devices is actually not a testing device, it's my primary device, I can go and I can make that change all on my own without any IT interaction. If I'm an admin, I have the ability to lock a device. I have the ability to report it as missing, which will kick it off in our lost and stolen pre-stage in Jamf. Or lastly, I can just view it in whatever MDM it's associated with. But what this does is it gives us this centralized view for all of the devices associated with a person. If I click through in a serial number, it allows me to view an in-depth health check and history of what's happened with that device. So I can see if it's checked in within 14 days, if it's managed in MDM, if it's got file vault or other encryption enabled, if it's on a compliant operating system, and I can actually view what the repair history for the device has been and for the audit history of the device has been. A lot of really cool things happening here. So there's no doubt in my mind that in the past year, this has been one of the most intense learning experiences my team will ever go through. Through some of the changes in our support, software, and hardware spaces that I highlighted today, we came away with some very valuable lessons that will apply to anything that we ship going forward, and I want to highlight those for you now. First, I feel like I'd be doing a huge disservice to you all if I didn't include this meme somewhere in a presentation about adapting to the events of the last year, but learning to pivot or learning to thrive on change has been key for us. For every single thing I've showed you today, there are likely 2 or 3 things, maybe even more, that we've opted not to ship because they just simply didn't make sense anymore. Whether that's in a digital by design world, pandemic or not, we had to really learn to identify where to focus our efforts to be able to build things that would maximize our experience. Next is that you need to design your digital spaces as if they were physical. By this, I mean be intentional about the way you design and implement software experiences internally. For many, the loss of that office environment has been incredibly difficult, and so the more care you can put into crafting the experience people have with tooling, the better. For my team, this is a very big part of anything we ship. You can see with a lot of the stuff I highlighted today that a lot of the focus is on that end user experience. In short, you need to meet your users at the places they want to be. And lastly, trust your users to build things along with you. So I know you might be wondering, Meg, why does your team keep building things that require users to help maintain them as sources of truth? And honestly, in short, it's because we trust our users. So at Shopify, we have a very big culture of acting like an owner. It's meant for us to build empathy with our merchants. It extends to things like cleaning up after yourself in a meeting room. And in our case, it's helping to maintain the systems that we've built for Shopify. We want to build with our users. We don't want to just build for them. And with that, I wrap up. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Happy to take any questions here now or also in Slack as well.
Thanks, Meg. That's great.
I'm trying to start my video. It says I can't, just in case. Oh, there we go. There we are.
Okay, that was really cool. It has, excuse me, a lot of very interesting stuff that I'm sure people would love to get their hands on, some of the software, etc. But I guess from the Slack channel, a lot of the stuff you're using is internal. Is that correct?
It is, yeah. I think for us, we find a lot of times that we have a lot of trouble finding third-party vendors that offer something that covers all of the bases of what we're looking to do. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of times we do go with bought solutions versus building, and that's always a question that comes up, is build versus buy. With these three particular examples, we just couldn't find anything that quite met exactly what we were looking for, or we needed to supplement it a little bit more with something home built. So with Help Desk, for example, yes, we're building on top of Fresh Service, but for Helpmoji and the Help Desk app, we needed to create those custom from scratch because we couldn't find anything out there to give us that ability. So sometimes it's a bit of a mix and match.
As it always seems to be these days. Be great if we had one piece of software that would do everything.
Yeah.
Just reading my different channels here. Dan Eng has asked a question. Will any of the custom solutions be commercialized or open sourced?
Great question. So this comes up a lot, I feel like, whenever I've presented something that's kind of one of these internally built solutions. Maybe it's possible. We do need to take that kind of back to the team and ensure that, like, before we look at anything like that, like, our code is like super tight before we kind of open it up to other people. Of course, obviously that's the benefit of it being open source, is people can help. But I will take it back and let everyone know that there was quite a bit of interest in these things. So no promises, but feel free to shoot me some DMs and I'll see what I can do. But no promises, of course. So.
Okay. Just looking for. I don't seem to see any other questions. Your presentation was really answered so many questions, I think, that people had.
Sorry to jump in here, Maurice. We do have someone with their hand up in the participants chat, Alex Lazar at the very top.
Is this the question about the developers?
Does your team have dedicated developers or do you work with other teams?
Both. So we have a lot of people on my team that have kind of developed themselves into being able to contribute to the code base and helping kind of bring these tools up from the ground all the way to what they are today. But we also have an adjacent team that has some developers on it that work on these tools full time.
Okay. Alex Lazar has a question. Go ahead, Alex. You have to unmute yourself, Alex. Are you there, Alex? Okay. I'm not seeing anything. Okay, we have another one here from John Welch. How do you manage DR BCP with the custom solutions?
John, can you elaborate what those acronyms mean?
Let me just find John. We'll unmute him. John. Oh, never mind. There we go.
Disaster recovery, business continuity planning.
Good question. I don't know if I can really kind of get into the full swing of that right now. I mean, I might need to think on it a little bit and just kind of confer back with some of the teams that built out these tools directly and just see kind of what they've got going. I'll throw it in the chat. I'll just circle back with them in a sec and then I'll throw it in there.
Okay. And I guess, any other questions before we close this session out? Okay, great. Thank you very much, Meg, for a very interesting talk.
No worries. Thanks.